Licensing Subcommittee meeting. I must announce that the meeting is recorded and going live, hence the indication down here. I could also remind you that at the final end of the meeting, if you could just remain seated for about 30 seconds till the recording is finished. I'll open the meeting now. I'm Councillor David Brown, who will be chairing the meeting today. So welcome once again to the meeting. Before we commence the formal business, I would like to cover just one or two housekeeping rules, which is as follows. Could I ask you first of all to switch off or make silent any mobile phones that you've got? And secondly, please keep the microphone switched off. The microphone's in front of you, and obviously when they're on, there's a red light, and I'm most guilty of anybody for not switching them off, but it does help for the recordings and interference one with the other. So only switch on your microphones when invited to speak, and when you finish speaking, again, switch them off. So, that said, let's move on to the next part. We move now formally to the particular meeting. And I'll follow the script here, and we start with item 1, which is apologies for absence. Have we any apologies for absence, committee officer?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Waldock.
Could you just put your microphone a little closer? I don't think that was too great.
Yes, Chair, we received apologies from Councillor Waldock.
Have we got any substitute members today?
Thank you, Chair. We haven't received any notification of substitute members.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Have any of the committee members any interest to declare on today's meeting? Thank you. No declarations of interest. Item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on October the 4th, 2021. Does any member have any comments on the minutes? Fine. No comments. So can I have a mover and seconder for the minutes?
I'll move them, Chair.
Thank you.
And I'll second them, Chair.
Thank you. So now we move down to item 5, which is an application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Ledgate Local, Unit 3B, West Parade, Front Street, Ledgate. So at this point, I would like to ask everyone to introduce themselves in this particular order. First of all, today, the committee. So on my right is
Councillor Alison Beattie, representing Pelton Division.
Fine, and my immediate left is
Councillor Carol Hampson, representing Craghead and Southmoor.
and the far left is
Councillor David Sutton-Lloyd, representing Aycliffe North and Midridge.
fine. Now I'll go around in a clockwise order. So down at the bottom we've got committee officer first. Carry on.
Nicholson, Committee Services Officer.
And next we've got,
Hello, yes, I'm Stephen Buston. I'm the legal advisor for the committee today.
and finally in the front,
Helen Johnson, I'm the licensing officer. Thank you.
thank you. Now I'll start at the first row first. So can we have your introduction, please?
Suresh Kanabadi, I'm the agent representing the applicant.
Thank you. Next one.
Sivasubramaniam is the sub owner.
Thank you. And with all due respect, we're not quite familiar with your names. So with your consent, it's all right if we address you as applicant. That's all right with you? Fine. Next row back, please.
Stuart Dimmick, 10 West Parade, Leggate.
Thank you.
Morning, it's Mrs Catherine Dimmick and I live at 10 West Parade at Gate.
I'm Brenda Thompson, 12 West Parade, Leggate.
Fred Thompson, 12 West Parade.
Right, that's fine. Thank you very much, everyone. We've got our introductions over, and I know it's difficult to remember all the names, but apologies for calling the front row the applicant. Now, please note, we've got 4 members on the committee, but only 3 will make the decision. So this particular arrangement, I would ask the legal officer just to explain the situation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just for everyone else's benefit, because the committee will be well aware, we have 4 councillors here today, but just to make it clear, only 3 will actually make the decision at the end, the deliberations. The number of 3 is prescribed by law, but we have 1 extra councillor here just to sit in case there are any issues during the hearing, whether there's a medical emergency or a conflict of interest arises. But just so it's clear, when you get the paperwork, it'll have 3 councillors on, and that's the explanation as to why that is. With regards to order of play, just a little bit about that. You're going to hear from Helen Johnson, who is the licensing team leader regarding the application for this premises licence. All parties will have an opportunity to ask Helen about her representations. After we've heard from Ms Johnson, we'll then hear representations from those parties who've chosen to join us regarding their objections to the application. Again, all parties will have an opportunity to ask questions of them. And then finally, we're going to hear from the applicant regarding their application, or it may well be his agent, with questions following that. Once the representations have been made and all questions have been asked, the parties will be asked to sum up at the end. We'll ask the licensing officer, the objectors and the applicant to do that in that order. Then after that, as I'm sure you're aware, the subcommittee, you'll retire to deliberate your decision in private, and everyone will hear of their decision later by telephone or email, and following that, everyone will receive a formal written decision notice which will outline the decision and the reasons for that decision, Chair. Does anyone have any questions about what I've just explained there procedure-wise? With a show of hands. No? Okay. Chair, with your permission, I suggest we hear from Mrs Johnson.
Right, thank you. Can we pass on to the presentation of the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. So, as this is already explained, it's an application for the grant of a premises licence for Ledgate Local, Unit 3B, West Parade, Front Street at Ledgate. A plan showing the location of the premises is attached as Appendix 2, page 16. The application for the premises licence was submitted to the Licensing Authority on the 16th of November by ARCA Licensing Consultants on behalf of the applicant. You'll see at Appendix 3, pages 18 to 34. Also, page 28 goes into the promotion of the licensing objectives and what the applicant will do in regards to promoting those licensing objectives. You'll see it includes things like installation of CCTV, operating a Challenge 25 policy, etc. The application was subject to a 28-day public consultation period that included a notice on the premises, included advertising on our website, serving the application on the responsible authorities, and also advertising within the local newspaper. That 28 days ended on the 13th of December. The application requests the following: sale of alcohol for consumption off the premises, 6 AM until midnight, Monday to Sunday. During the consultation period, the Licensing Authority originally received 8 representations from residents, and under the Act they're called other persons. These were received via email by a third party. Now, under the legislation, we need to make sure that a representation which is received is by an individual and it's identified on where they live. Out of those 8, we validated 5 of those, so we didn't receive any other responses back from the other 3 people who had submitted a representation in order for us to take it forward. So as it stands, this application had 5 valid representations by other persons. Those are at Appendix 4, pages 37 to 52. The applicant's agent considered the representations and took into consideration the Council's statement of licensing policy, in particular the recommended framework of hours, and they amended the application, which you'll see at page 35, for sale of alcohol off sales to 7 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. Monday to Sunday. Appendix 5, at pages 54 and 55, we received responses from the Council's Environmental Health Department and the Fire Safety Authority. They replied with no comments in regards to that. Therefore, the options available, Chair, is to grant the licence subject to the conditions that are consistent with the operating schedule accompanying the application and the mandatory conditions set out within the Act. Grant the licence to subject to modified conditions to that of the operating schedule where the committee considers it appropriate for the promotion of the licence and objectives and the mandatory conditions set out within the Act. To exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates. In this particular application, the only licensable activity is the sale of alcohol. To refuse to specify a person on the licence as a designated premises supervisor. Or lastly, reject the application. Thank you, Chair, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ellen, for that comprehensive presentation. You offered to take any questions. I'll go around in a particular order and remind you that this is questions only, just to stick to questions. So first of all, have we any questions from the objectors from what you've heard up to now? Yes, sir?
Of the 5 objectors, were they individuals or were they husband and wife?
They look to be partners. The other 3 representations, you've got Mr. and Mrs. Hannah, Mr. and Mrs. Greenwell, and Mr. and Mrs. Parkin.
Thank you.
Just to confirm, they weren't able to attend the hearing today.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think quite a lot of residents in the street are quite elderly and have mobility issues in terms of getting to a meeting like this. We're probably representation of the youngest people in the street. So that's probably the reason why they haven't attended. But yeah, that does answer my question.
Fine. Have we any questions then from the applicant to what we've heard up to now? No questions. Fine. Members, have you any questions from what we've heard? No questions. Good. And anything further from the legal officer?
I don't think so, not on this occasion, Chair.
Right, we'll move on now to the objectors and their representations. So you can either go through what's been presented already in the report or when you sent in earlier things, or you can add to what you've found out in the meantime. So it's entirely up to you now for your presentation.
First of all, I've been associated with the street for over 40 years and I've seen a lot of changes within the village setting, and moved to the village, moved back to the village about 4 years ago and located myself in 10 West Parade. And from experience, we've seen a lot of antisocial behaviour in the street, which was mainly caused. There's a small plantation towards the end of the street, and towards the weekends there tends to be a lot of adolescent youths who used the plantation as a drinking den. And I've certainly been in Ledgate when I've been approached by young people to buy them alcohol or cigarettes, which obviously I've refused. But unfortunately, these days that's not a deterrent for a lot of our young people. So as a consequence of this, whilst it's wrong to be supplying children with alcohol, and I know the problems that licensees have in terms of trying to restrict that. If a 25-year-old comes in and buys it for somebody else and gives it to them, you know, it can hardly be accountable to the licensee. But nevertheless, it's an ongoing problem. And but from this drinking location, we've experienced obviously antisocial behaviour, shouting, screaming, theft, minor things like sort of from the front of properties, attempted car theft, damage to cars, usual vandalism of sort of many occasions, and the usual litter, cans, bottles in the street, which you know, and includes like sort of just general litter. The other issue which I find sort of alarming is that the location of the licensed premises is within 150 metres of an infant and nursery school, and I think generally it sort of underlines a shift that, you know, I can't imagine anybody going into a shop and buying alcohol at 7 o'clock in the morning, never mind alone at 12 o'clock at night. So just the other thing which I believe is significant is the over-provision of alcohol in Lead Gate. Of currently 22 premises in Lead Gate, if this application is granted, 11 will be licensed premises, which I find alarming. Not to mention from the actual premises is Nexport 1 to number 6 West Parade attached. So it's very close to our residential properties, which obviously causes disruption from sort of pedestrians and cars. We have an ongoing issue with parking in the street. Unfortunately, the location of our properties mean that we only have the parking space at the front of our properties, which is often used by the existing shops, so any additional shops will just exacerbate this situation. The current parking outside the premises is drive-in spaces, which means that they have to reverse back out onto a busy main road. So busy that the council's recently introduced parking sort of speed restrictions, like a reduction in the road, just to make it one way. So it's obviously an ongoing issue that we'll have with regards to speeding motorists. And I think in all, I think there's 10 spaces outside the property, most of which are used by shop owners who are there most of the day. So I believe that there's a distinct lack of inadequate parking, and obviously the danger with reversing onto the road. And probably the thing which is significant in the fact that it's the social impact that alcohol provision has on our society, and in particular safeguard recommendations regarding social deprivation deriving from the alcohol consumption. And one of the things which I've come to realise is the process in granting licence has become apparent to me and most of my neighbours. It seems the lack of provision in the process of considering safeguarding our communities as recommended by the Council's own Health and Wellbeing Board. And I would urge the Chair to read this report, as it's quite significant in the social deprivation of our societies, and in particular in the Lead Gate area, which is affected greatly by the misuse of alcohol. That's the end of my statement, Chair.
Thank you very much. The committee's taken all what you've said on board. Before we go to questions, I think I propose to go along all the objectives if there's anything to add to what's been said already.
Thank you, thank you. And I would iterate all the things that Stuart has said. And from my perspective, and again, it's nothing that I've got personal against opening up new business ventures, don't get me wrong, but I've worked in the NHS for over 40 years in a lot of different roles and a lot of senior roles. And I'm associated at the moment with NHS England, through improvement, work with public health initiatives, etc. And I'm coming from a very health improvement and inequity service objective. Now, as Stuart's mentioned, clearly 50% of the service provision that we have is licensed to provide alcohol. And I know from a health perspective that when I looked at the Health and Wellbeing Board's objectives, and I did try to speak to the Director of Public Health because I do know her, but I was assured that both her and the police would be consulted and are aware of the application process, etc. So I was reassured by that. But certainly looking at your Health and Wellbeing Board strategy, it very much talks about the importance of health deprivation and the impact that that has on local communities. Now, alcohol consumption does tend to be a precursor for things like drug taking. It has an impact on mental health. It has wider implications in terms of domestic violence, etc., all of the crime and disorder, all of those associated problems that you have with alcohol. And that's widely recognised since obviously they've extended the licensing laws and provision and buying it in supermarkets, etc. It's the evidence base is there in terms of the impact that that then has, not just on individuals, but on families, on wider communities. And I think that the last thing that we actually need in a small village such as ours is even more provision and access to alcohol for young people who, as Stuart has mentioned, we've already witnessed firsthand what the experience is of those individuals being able to have alcohol available to them. And as I say, I just feel passionately that we would be doing our community a disservice if we aren't ambassadors for them to be able to say we do not need more provision of alcohol within our local community. Thank you.
Thank you. Move along, and any more contributions?
Yeah, well, I just have to reiterate everything that's been said. But I've been a resident of that street for about 35, 36 years. And at the moment, I just feel as though we've been absolutely forgotten about. You know, it's a street, we have so many sales places for selling alcohol. We don't need it at the end of the street. We have parking problems, you know, we're disabled. We cannot get to the houses for the cars, parking from the shops. So, and actually, I'm a bad sleeper to start with, but we're going to have cars coming 11, 12 o'clock at night, pulling up. The kids are going to be going past the windows. It's going to be absolutely horrific. It's bad enough in the street, and we definitely don't need a sale anyway for alcohol. I can't say any more that's already been said. Thank you.
Thank you. And any further comments?
If I leave my house at the main door and turn left, there's an off-licence 500 yards up the road. If I come out my door and turn right, there's an off-licence 200 yards up the road. And I feel that there is no place for another one in the middle. I think it'll put more stress on the street. That's my feelings. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. We've heard your objections and representations. First of all, now we go on to the licensing officer. Have you any questions of what you've heard from the objectors at the moment? Right, thank you. The applicant now, have you any questions to ask of the objectors of what you've heard up to now? Right. We move now to the members. Members, any questions to the objectors? Right, listen.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is for the licensing officer. Can I just confirm we haven't actually had any objection letters in from Public Health or from the police, and there's nothing been raised by the locally elected member?
That's correct. They were consulted on because they're one of the responsible authorities.
Yeah.
Public Health and the police are included as a consultee, and the only objections we've had are from looks like residents from West Parade.
So there's nothing from the local member?
No.
Thank you.
Anyone?
Yeah, again to the licensing officer, a little bit intrigued, a bit more information about reference to there was further traffic provision being looked at by the county in the area, and it's obviously from the objectors' point of view, it is a big point amongst it about the increase in possible traffic, etc. Can you say if there is something still ongoing?
I wouldn't know from my perspective, because obviously that would be the Highways Department who would be looking into things like that. What I can say is that parking isn't necessarily comes under licensing. It's more the traffic management, it's Highways Department who look into that. I don't know if legal's got any further to say on that point.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it can come in with the framework of licensing if you think the parking is going to be to such an extent that it could become a nuisance. But ultimately, this shop, I'm assuming, has planning permission, is already open, already has customers going. So it's whether or not the sale of alcohol, you believe, is going to increase the traffic and have a knock-on effect with the parking. But that's a matter for you to determine between yourselves.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chair, just for the benefit of my colleague, I think if you look at page 41, I think the traffic calming appears to be, it looks like it's one of the chicaney sort of like things, which is why I was specifically asking the question, was there any objections from the local member? Because it does appear from that image that obviously some sort of previous work has been done, which is why I'm a bit surprised that there's nothing from the local member.
That it was just the reference was a little bit vague in some of the context, and I did worry whether or not there was still other stuff ongoing.
Not specifically. Sorry, go on. You've got something to
The traffic calming has been there for about 3 or 4 months. The council introduced it. The section of traffic used to be an old railway bridge, so the council recently flattened the bridge and made that little bit of bypass. And what happened was that the local councillors became involved as well as the MP, and they decided to, as the first phase, to introduce the island as phase 1, to see if that would reduce the traffic from speeding into Leg Gate. There's been a number of accidents on that road, and indeed one fatality a couple of years ago since the bridge came down. So that was phase 1 of sort of, so they're still currently assessing the traffic at that point. The other point I would make is that the shop was the old cooperative buildings in Lakegate, which I remember well as a child. But that shop has been closed for many years, so it's a start-up situation. So there's been no traffic to that shop. In fact, there's a further shop next to it, so there's going to be a significant increase in traffic. These are both start-up situations, so there's no existing, it's not within the existing level of traffic at the moment. Just to clarify that point.
Fine. Now, before I move on, it's not a specific question I've got for the objectors, but I'd like to hear everything that you've got. You do appreciate that we have had record of your objections and your letters, and particularly the photographs. We're all aware of that, even though we're not familiar with Ledgate. I would point out that, and I think the legal officers pointed out, we're here as a licensing committee. We're not here for parking and problems, but we take on board your particular problems. And what you have raised, in my mind, I don't know about the other members, it's not unique to Ledgate. This is a problem throughout the county, parking and off licensing and what have you. I also note with the photographs that you've sent, and perhaps you could clarify this for me. We're talking about Unit 3, but is there 5 or 6 units around there?
I think there's 5 units. I say 2 of them are currently empty. One of them includes the applicants. There's a dance school. There's a gym. So yeah, we do have from. I agree with the chair. It's an increasing problem across the county with traffic and licensing applications. However, the one thing that we as a society can do is change that. And it has. I understand the restrictions that the licensing committee has, but sometimes enough's enough, I guess. But yes, there's 5 units, a dance school and a gym, who all park in the surrounding streets. So I understand that it's not necessarily the applicant's issue, and to be considered, but it will increase traffic within our street. And for the likes of Mrs. Thompson, she only has one place to park, and that's our front door, and she can't get there, which means. And as I mentioned earlier, Mrs. Dimmick and I are probably the youngest people in the street, and we're 63. So it's a very elderly residential area. Thank you.
And just to move on to the last objector there, we are aware of the location plan, and we can more or less work out where your addresses are. So it is taken into consideration. So that's me finished, or the members finished. Sorry? All right, members? Sorry.
That's it. Yes, I suppose, and again, I work from home at the moment now, half-time, so, and my study is at the front of the house. So I see on a daily basis when I'm sitting in that study area, because there are units occupied, and a lot of them, the parking is intermittent. It's there constantly all day, because as you can imagine, people are going to the gym throughout the day. They're going to the beauty salon throughout the day. There's now going to be an upholstery unit and furniture renovations. Again, that hasn't opened yet, but that one will be next door to the new applicant. Then we've got a takeaway and cafe. So all of the premises have traffic that's constant throughout the day, and from the gym on an evening and the beauty salon. So because there are a limited number of spaces in front of all of those units, they all fight for the same spaces. So often if they're taken, what happens is that the traffic will park alongside existingly parked traffic where there are no spaces. But so they block the entrance into our street. So if there was any emergency vehicles needed to come in for any reason, or you're trying to get round an already very awkward turn in the road because of the traffic calming measures, if you try to turn right into the street, if there are one or two additional vehicles that are parked there illegally, which they do regularly, we cannot get into the street that way. You have to go around the back into Baker Street and come round the opposite way to be able to park in our street. So again, my concern is that the more units that are occupied, that problem is going to be exacerbated again and again. And as I say, I hear constantly the peeping of horns and brakes screeching, because when they're trying to reverse out of the spaces, because of the traffic calming measures and also the traffic coming out of the village, quite often you cannot turn your head and look to make sure that when you're pulling out of a space, because you can't reverse into them, don't forget, you have to pull into it. When they're reversing out, you're reversing out onto a main road, which is really busy. And my problem is that the more spaces that are going to be occupied, the more chance that we're going to have that either a child will be going past from the school, or that there'll be a road traffic collision, because it's just a matter of time. The more we increase that throughput of traffic into those 10 or so spaces that are allocated for those shops.
Chair, sorry. I just need to get us back on the track slightly, because we've gone off, I'm afraid, from the procedure. There's been representations there rather than further questions. So if we could get back onto, it's duly noted what's been said, but I think everyone's had ample opportunity now to make their initial representations. So I think now we need to hear from the applicant with your approval, Chair.
Well, actually, I accept what you just said there, Stephen. On my script here, any questions from the legal officer?
No, I don't have any questions, Chair.
Thank you. We now move on to the applicant or the applicant's representations. So the floor's over to you now to put your case forward, and then we'll go through the same procedure with questions and what have you. So it's over to you now to say whatever you've got to say.
Thank you, Chair. We heard about the application, Chair. I think I just want to give a few, I know you already know, but I was going to give you a little background of this premises. I mean, as we heard, there are 5-6 units. This particular unit is historically has been a supermarket, co-op, and it's been a licensed premises before, So now the premises is being vacant, it's been taken over by a new applicant here. I mean, he's not, far away. He's a local businessman, retailer, and he's been working locally as well, and he had another shop he's managing. Now he's taking over this one. Chair, I think, so considering this is a commercial premises, and it's going to be a supermarket, is well recognized a premier part of a premier group. So I know we are here for alcohol, but also the shop is going to be selling everything that a household need, all the stuff. The alcohol is going to be part of the business, probably account for 10-15% of it. The rest of it, everything else, and it's going to be refitted, newly. That's important, the way it's been fitted, and the windows is going to be like a clear windows, which the shop, management can see outside, and the way it's been set up very professionally, that's what I'd like to say. Chair, and you noticed, we have put forward some operating schedule to promote the 4 licensing objectives. Chair, I mean, that's what we are looking at today. Also what we've been looking at in terms of putting this application, looking at the 4 licensing objectives. So, I mean, I totally understand, we totally understand about the objectors' concerns, and we've been listening to them, and we will be addressing, I think, applicant also. We've been looking at the objection, we've been reading that, and then we heard from them, one of their concern is the antisocial behavior, which comes from underage drinking, the group of youngsters drinking, and like that. So, we have proposed conditions in the applications already, having those Challenge 25 policies and staff trainings. So, Chair, I think, if you Challenge 25 is like any other supermarket, they all have this Challenge 25 policy where anyone 25 or under must prove the age. Otherwise, they don't get, alcohol. So, that is kind of a strong proposal or operating schedule we have in terms of preventing or protecting children from harm in that sense. Chair, I think it's also you have to look at how the business is managed. I think he got a lot of experience, managing locally, and this kind of, problems comes through, and he knows how to manage it. And also we are proving that through the operating schedule as well. I think, Chair, I've been listening about the proxy sales, like other people, elders are buying for the other youngsters. So if committee wanted to consider that particular concern to address to the residents, we could have another conditions we could offer is to have a training, a comprehensive training in terms of proxy sales. I don't have the wording for it, probably the legal officer can do something around that. So mainly, we used to have conditions to address that. So maybe a signage, which we will do. I think we are happy to incorporate that extra conditions to address that particular point raised by the residents. I mean, obviously I can understand, it happens, and this is one of their concerns also. Chair, I think the other valuable, concerns raised by them is the litter of cans and bottles. So applicant himself, when running another premises, so they have, every 2 hours, one of their staff always go out and pick up any litter and keep the area clean. I think that's one of the important things they manage part of the business, And also we talk about the nursery, normally the school nursery children, they always come with the parents, they supervise them, monitor them. So I think, so that wouldn't be a, concerns regarding sale of alcohol. And Chair, I think, I think important here, what we are looking at a reputable supermarket coming in to an existing, already historically a supermarket is becoming a supermarket again, that's what I said, a local shop. I think the residents, I mean, we heard from them, there are a lot of residents locally, elderly people, which is going to be, I think they will find that very useful. Right now, I think we can understand they have concerns about alcohol. I mean, the alcohol is, we are only selling for customers who is already shopping other products. It's not like, people, it's not alcohol only shop, or people when they come to shop, it's an additional product that we are offering. So I think in the longer term, I can assure you that, the objectors and the residents would be happy to have a shop, where they can buy everything. So I think, I think considering the, the experience of the applicant, and he lives locally, and the type of supermarket is going to be, we already mentioned in the application as well, it's going to be part of the Premier Group. And the other further steps we are prepared to take to address the concerns of the residents, objectors. We would like to invite you to consider this application positively. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Have we any questions from what you've heard from the licensing officer?
No
the objectors, from what you've heard up to now, any questions you would like to ask the applicant?
The agent said that the property was an existing shop and had a licence to sell alcohol. I've lived in the village for 58 years. I can remember when it was co-op. I can remember when it was a kitchen sort of outfitters shop, a display area. I can never remember that shop was a shop or licensed to sell alcohol. It's a start-up situation.
Thank you. That was a question. Can you answer that question, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think looking at the history, I looked at co-op and all the co-op, I don't see any co-op, not selling alcohol. All the co-op selling alcohol. So I don't see any reason, why they didn't sell alcohol, when they were open.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, 58 years ago, the co-op didn't sell alcohol. I was there, and it didn't sell alcohol.
Point taken. Are there any more questions?
Does the premises have planning permission?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
As part of that planning permission, were there any objections to that by residents?
No. As far as I know, the landlord said, there were no objections.
If this application was refused, would the shop still open, but without selling alcohol?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, do you want to come back?
Just for the Chair's information, the unit was one huge cooperative building. We've seen them in lots of villages. So it used to sell all sorts of things, and it was after the kitchen outfitters left the property, it was subdivided into units, and that unit there was up until recently. It was derelict and full of pigeons, so it's only recently been renovated to be able to re-let as the building next to it. So they've been standing empty for many, many years, just for your information.
I take that point from the photograph of the large building and the units at the bottom. We appreciate that point. Have we any more questions from the objectors, from what you've heard? All right. It's now questions from the members. All right, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. Can I actually just double check of the applicant that the revised opening times are proposed as 7 a.m. till 23:30? Is that right, licensing officer? Thank you. My second question, in view of what the licensing officer's just mentioned, do we know when planning permission was granted?
I don't. Can you turn your...
Well, so currently we are leaseholders, the applicant is. The landlord had the planning permission, so he granted, to us now.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also, just in this moment, I'd like to make one more point on the hours you ask. I think we said on the licensing hours, I think we had a consultation with the police, and then police actually recommended to have until 2300. So I just wanted to mention that. So, yeah.
Any further questions? Just before we leave, a matter of information or clarification. How long has the applicant been in business on those premises?
Yeah, I think totally he's been managing retail premises over 8 years now, right? Yeah.
Sorry, say again?
8 years.
8 years. I've already had a query, but the member here asked about the consultation you had to reduce the hours from the original application. presumably before this request went in, or this idea of selling alcohol went in, I would like to know, over these 8 years that he's been in business, he must have done a feasibility study, and is it going to make a significant difference to the viability of this business?
Yes, of course, thank you. I think he knows the area, he done a study of the area. And also, as you can see, it is on this about 6 units. And there are, at the moment, there's a gym, people visit gyms, and the nursery and all the other, what we call the salon. So those also will be part of the customers coming to the premises, and plus the local residents, and then obviously part of the study found the passing customers would be coming in as well. And normally the customers, there's a parking space, shopping times around 20 minutes for one customer. Yeah. So they wouldn't be parking like hours and hours, they will just quickly shop, and 20 minutes, they will go away. So those are the studies we've done in terms of how the moment is. And, we believe, this addition of supermarket for this unit is very positive impact for the locals as well, in terms of, use of that unit. If not being used, you can see the pigeons and all kind of other things happens. So using it is give a life to the area. I think is all in all is a very, very positive move in terms of the locality.
Thank you. Before I move on, can I just ask you to switch the microphone off, please? Thank you. And now, have we any questions from the legal officer from what we've heard up to now?
No, Chair, everything's been covered, thanks.
We move on now with the more letters final chance to address. So I hope everything's been uncovered or whatever. If you want to make any more comments, this is the final chance. So first of all, any further comments from the licensing officer?
Nothing further from me, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And final chance now for anything for the objectors to say, any further things they want to bring up that hasn't been brought up already.
The only thing I would ask the committee to consider is that, and probably the most significant factor I can put towards the committee and the chair, is that out of 22 business premises in Lakegate, 11 will be licensed if this application goes ahead. Thank you.
Point taken. Yes, carry on.
Yes, thank you. And I suppose, again, I know that you will take this into consideration, but it's that social conscience element of it and the obligation to our local community that we have a duty of care to be able to look after not just the residents along that road, but I suppose it's just to be able to reinforce and urge that social conscience element.
Thank you. And any final comments from the objectors?
Yes, he's saying that it's going to be a shop as well as an off-licence, but there's already shops in Legate that are well used by the residents of Legate, so that's going to harm them as well. Thank you.
Point taken. And I refer that back to the feasibility question. However, no further questions from the objectors, so the final chance now to address to the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. And also just want to point out, we have 5 relevant objections, and if you really look at the surrounding residences, at least we have 200 residents, close by, and it's only about 5 people that make out around 2%, under 3%, which is a minor. So it seems like, we have majority of residences are happy and supporting these applications, the assumptions. Thank you, Chair. That's all I want to say.
And the final comment comes from the legal officer, and at the point where he selects or requests the three members to make the decision. So final comments from you, legal officer.
Indeed, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, committee, you've heard from all of the relevant parties now. I think everyone's had a good opportunity to address you, so you're well aware, and you've obviously read the report as well and the contents therein. You need to now deliberate regarding the evidence that you've heard, your decision and the reasons for your decision. You have, as I've said, the written representations of those objecting. You've heard from the objectors today that have decided to attend. You need to attach the appropriate weight to each representation. I will be available to give you legal advice regarding the decision, but ultimately you need to set your minds to the question, is this licence going to undermine the licensing objectives? If you feel it is, then you need to consider whether conditions can be attached or limitations put in place to address those concerns. But ultimately, if you feel conditions or limitations can't address any concerns that you may have, you need to set your mind to whether the licence should be granted at all. I ask you to make your considerations in private. Obviously, you need to give due consideration to the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy. You have the extracts in your report for the relevant parts, and obviously you're aware of the Section 182 guidance. I know you're all familiar. It's a matter of the subcommittee now going away and deliberating, and as you've alluded to, Chair, you need to decide which three of you are going to do that, and if you can make that clear before we retire.
It's Councillor Hampson. He's going to retire. So
Okay, that's great, Chair. As long as everyone's clear on that, that's fine. It's a matter now of, I think, any other business and closing the meeting, Chair.
I haven't been notified of any other business. So now we move on to where we will retire to make our decision. And as the legal officers pointed out, we make our decision, we do call the legal officer back to check that everything is above board and we can't be appealed against. And then anyone watching or anyone on the broadcast wishes to find out the decision, either email licensing@durham.gov.uk or get in contact with the licensing department. The address can also be found on the website with papers for this meeting. So thank you all for your attendance, and we will consider this in private now. Thanks so much.